Welcome to High Stakes, episode 21, aka season 2, episode 1. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. High Stakes is produced by Mike Lawrence. You can find him on Twitter at Awesemo. And my guest today, I'm excited to have on the underdog best ball Mania 2 champ, Liam Murphy. He is at ChessLiam on Twitter. Liam won $1,001 last year in best ball. So he bested my Millie Maker. He got $1 extra. Congrats to that, Liam. Liam, how are you doing today?
Doing good, man. Just got back from a bachelor party, so gonna be a little bit lower energy. I'm a little sick and under the weather, but excited to talk to you today.
How often do you go to bachelor parties? Because as I recall, you were at a bachelor party when you won Best Ball Mania 2. Is that correct?
Yeah, it actually the same crew of dudes. One of the other guys is getting married and just happened to have a bachelor party up in Vermont. We were on Lake Champlain. It was really beautiful. It was a great time. But yeah, I mean, couple down bad dudes, like, you know, had too many Budweisers one day, had some real lows, some real highs of that weekend.
All right. So you say up in Vermont, or are you, do you live, no, you live in St. Petersburg, Florida. I know where you live because
yeah, I grew up in New Hampshire though. So I got
okay.
a lot of friends up there.
New Hampshire. So how far, because you're a Buffalo Bills fan. Were you, you grew up a Bills fan? Is that a common thing where you're from in New Hampshire?
No. So my dad grew up in Buffalo. And so I grew up watching the Bills games. Like one of my first memories in the NFL, I think, was the Music City Miracle, the Bills Titans playoff game. And so that was one of my first memories, but everyone was a Patriots fan where I grew up, and that's how I'm a loyal Bills fan, because obviously the kids at school would give me shit and the Bills were not that good those years, but I stuck with them, and it's coming up me now.
So I assume you're not old enough to remember when the Bills went to the Super Bowl. Was it like 3 years in a row and lost every time?
No, I'm 29. I was born in 92, so that did not remember those years. But
yeah, that was like right when you were born, as I recall, early 90s.
Yeah. But there's some relics from because one of those Super Bowls was in Tampa, so I find sometimes like thrift, coats in the thrift shops and whatnot.
Okay, and people listening might not know, the reason I know that you live in St. Petersburg, Florida is because that's something you have in common with the Best Ball 1 champ. Justin Hertzig also lives in St. Petersburg, Florida. Is there something in the water in St. Petersburg? Are there seminars going on about best ball? What do you think it is? Why is everybody winning from St. Petersburg?
Good vibes, good weather, sharp drafters,
All right, that's all it takes, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of people don't know me as a best ball guy, just because I have never won anything at best ball. So I guess why would people know me as a best ball guy at all? But I maxed out Best Ball Mania 2 last year as well. I am super into best ball. I'm going to max out again this year. I'll probably max out at least one DraftKings best ball, maybe drafters. Now that I'm seeing that it might overlay, I'm kind of focusing there. But I'm super excited to have you on as a guy who clearly knows best ball really well. You won last year. You started your own stream now. You have your own YouTube channel where you just do a lot of best ball drafts. Is that like a daily thing? Are you doing a draft with the champ stream every day?
We have no vision.
We being you, or are there more people involved?
Yeah, the royal we. So me.
Okay.
Me.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
I have no vision really for the channel. Just figure, I think if I was trying to earn money through content, I need to make this is how I made $1 million, and I need to start making TikToks, and I need to be on Snapchat and Instagram. I think ultimately I have a good idea for some chess content that I'm going to get back into. So, I think if you're someone who's working a 9-to-5 like I was, and you think that if you earn a lot of money, just like, oh, now life is set, but the truth is you can't spend your day just like watching TV and sitting around the house. You need to do something. And so learning a bit of entrepreneurial skills. And I think I don't really know the vision for the channel once the season starts. Had a lot of great big guests that I really enjoyed the conversations with there. Going to have you on in a couple of weeks, I think. Might do some DFS stuff. Feeling a little burnt out from it, honestly. Really? Just the volume of drafts and just doing the streams and but yeah, I don't know, like just something to do, and we'll see what it comes into, and trying to build in revenue. I quit my job, for those who don't know, after I won Best Ball Mania 2. I used to work for chess.com. And trying to build in revenue streams that can whatever compound over time.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, $1 million is nice. It's a lot of great money to have when you're 29, but $1 million when you're 29 is not going to last you the rest of your life, which I think a lot of people don't realize. Like, you won $1 million, you can quit, you retire now. It's like, no, $1 million is great. It's a lot of money, more money than I've ever had in my life. It doesn't last you the rest of your life. So you do need to find other ways to make money. One thing that I've noticed about you, so one of my best qualities as far as doing this show, I think, is that I'm not afraid to reach out to people to be a guest on this show. You do these streams every day, so you clearly have that same personality trait where you're just willing to reach out to anybody to try to get them on best ball streams. Are you what percentage of your streams would you say are recorded, are on YouTube these days?
Well, so I think I should. I mean, yeah.
What percentage of your drafts? I think I said that wrong. What percentage of your best ball drafts?
I'm not afraid to be direct, and like, I kind of have a background in sales. For those who don't know, I first reached out to Peter Overzet, and I was with an idea of doing a chess stream with him last summer. I was like, hey man, I think, like I knew Pete because I have a background in poker a little bit, like I've been playing for a while, and I knew Pete as the man's years ago when I lived in New York City, and then I stumbled upon Pete doing fantasy football. I was like, holy shit, is that the man's? And so I just thought that, like, Pete's a comedian. He's a funny guy. I thought, I think I'm a pretty funny guy. And so I was like, I think we can make some good content. So I just cold messaged him, and he's like, yeah, let's give it a try. Like, credit to Pete. And so we had some chess streams to begin. And then, yeah, like I reached out to people who I think would give a unique take on best ball. It was like some people I just know from the high stake lobbies. I try to reach out to some poker people. Some people big time me. They don't respond to me. It doesn't bother me. But yeah, just shoot from the hip, and had a lot of, I think you'd be surprised at how many people are willing to come on a show. And anytime someone reaches out to me, I try to, especially now, like I try to make time and go on their channel, no matter how big or small they are.
That's awesome. Yeah. So yeah, that's funny. I was watching your stream that you did with Pete Overzet just earlier today. I was rewatching that stream, and I had forgotten that you knew him as Pete Manzanelli. I don't know Pete Overzet as Pete Manzanelli. Like, I know that's a big bit that he does, and it seems to be much bigger than I realized. Going back a long ways, that is not something that I have paid a lot of attention to. But it seems like the man's is a big player. But so when you reached out to Pete, that was before you had won anything in terms of best ball. Did you have designs on being a DFS or best ball content creator at that time? Because I mean, clearly you had some interest in doing content. That's why you reached out to Pete. Were you trying to kind of get into this space, and then winning best ball obviously kind of gave you a little bit of a head start there?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like, no, so I had designs of doing chess things. Like, I worked through chess.com. And so I think I could pretty, not easily, but I think I could get a channel up and running for chess. I have a couple different ideas there. And so it's kind of chess centric to begin. I'm a gambler, and I've been I don't think Pete realized how much best ball I was doing, because he liked to be like, I'm your best ball coach. And I was like, okay. But like Pete does great stuff with best ball too. But no, it wasn't like, hey, this is I'm going to get with a fantasy football guy, and then I'm going to do this. I mean, I love fantasy football. And so that's why I was like, yeah, let's, when fate hits you like it has hit me, I was like, I guess I need to get up in these content streets too. But no, it was not with a deep-seated plan to be like, okay, and then I'll segue to fantasy football myself. So still figuring that out. Like, maybe I'll work for a company in fantasy football one day. Maybe I'll go get back a real person job again, go back to school or something. I don't know. I have the freedom right now to take some time and figure it out. And I mean, I'm definitely taking a high risk approach when, like reinvesting quite a bit into best ball this year, and plan on firing in DFS once football starts.
Are you and Pete still doing those chess streams this year?
No, Pete is just so busy. Like, he just has so many different and like this year, I think it's just gotten more, where, I mean, we might try to get a stream here or there, but his schedule is just jam packed. So,
Okay.
and having done some streams like a bunch of days in a row, like I get it, where it's like you want to unplug and have your time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Are you a big consumer of DFS and or best ball content?
Um, I would say fantasy football content. There's a couple, like I listen to the ETR free pods. Last year I would listen sometimes to like the ship chasing crew and the people around there. DFS like kind of is blended in there with the best ball with those same channels. Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm like, and I'll listen to like the Swolecast. Like I try to listen to things that make me laugh. But I'm not like, you know, and I pick up nuggets from everyone's pod. Like Davis Maddock, he has a bunch of guests on. You have a bunch of guests on. So you learn from people's processes along the way. But during season, I don't know how much pods I listen to. Like the summer off season a little bit more, I would say.
Okay, so like during best ball season, as you were preparing and making your teams last year in best ball, you were not like, you know, daily consuming content to hear what's going on in camps and stuff. Were you kind of paying close attention to camp movement, that kind of stuff, or were you kind of more hands off, that kind of stuff?
So I think it's tough because it's like you don't. For me, like I don't want too many voices in my, you know, like
yep.
I want to trust what my initial lean was as far as like other content producers. So like I don't listen to too many. Like there are times where I would just take breaks and be like, I'm not listening to anyone, I'm just drafting. News is delicate too. Like I'm kind of new to Twitter, where this is like my second year or something on Twitter. So like the direct news like that is just kind of new to me, that being so accessible. And I feel like this year is unique with just like the amount of news we've gotten and the amount that the market's not afraid to make a big jump in a unproven player. Things are changing, and luckily for me, a lot of the guys rising, I already kind of had cheaper stands on. Not that matters exactly, or like 100%, but it makes it a little bit easier to fade a guy if he goes from an 18th round to a 10th round pick. If you
Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah, well, not him, but like Pickens and you know, like players like that. Gabriel David, you know, like there's plenty of players I can tell you I have cheaper costs of, but it's the whole ADP market in a snap of time. So I remember my first year playing best ball, which was 2 years ago. I only played on DK because I discovered it like a month before the season randomly through the app. And there was like a little, like that year was unique because people were afraid to draft rookies because of the COVID offseason. So I didn't really think that was logical. And so like I just remember I had like a huge bag on Chase Claypool because I would just like take the same guys at the end of every draft. And the market's just changed a lot. And so, but I remember there are some quotes I will trust, and it's like not players, it's not coach speak, but it was like Eric Ebron was like, he's going to be a problem in this league. Yeah. And I was like, I don't think you just say that about a rookie. Like, you know, like he's not like a top 5 pick, you know? So I was like, okay. And whatever, it worked out with Claypool that year.
Yeah. So so speaking of like listening to content and like the rise and fall of players, something that I've like started to think about a little bit is, do you do anything to combat like, so I drafted a lot of Isaiah Pacheco. He's an example of a player that I drafted a lot in the 18th round while he was still going there. And now I draft a lot of like Isaiah Likely, right? So I'm going to have a you know, probably around the field of Isaiah Pacheco. I'll probably have close to around the field of Isaiah Likely. His ADP is now jumping. One thing that I'm concerned about is like, I'm never going to have them on the same team because I kind of let the field dictate, you know, which players I take. And like, so because Isaiah Pacheco was going in the 18th round and now he's going in the 12th round sometimes, maybe that's not his ADP, but maybe 13th, 14th. I don't really take him anymore. And now I'm taking Isaiah Likely, for example, because he's going in the 18th round. And as he rises, I won't take him anymore. So now I'm like, well, I'm never going to have those two players on my same team. And that's just one example that I'm giving. But like, because I'm sort of letting the tides dictate where I'm trying to like, you know, stick a player where they are, where I think they should be. And then I take them when they go on this side of that number. And then I don't take them if they go, you know, earlier than I want them. Then I don't, that the tides kind of dictate that I'm going to have sometimes players are going to be who aren't correlated in any way other than their ADPs rise at the same time or fall at the same time. So I'm going to have correlations in my lineups, and I'm like, am I making a mistake by just letting the field dictate, whether I ever have these players? Do you do anything to kind of combat that? Do you, say maybe for this draft I will take Isaiah Pacheco, I'll reach for him in the 13th, 14th round, and then get Isaiah Likely, just as an example, like two players that are
for
rising
those
and falling.
For those only listening in audio form, Neil has the have you seen the Always Sunny Philadelphia, like the bunch of different strings?
Yeah.
He has that board behind me as he's saying.
That's right. Yeah.
No,
exactly.
why I say that is a joke is I think that best ball is a really interesting game for many reasons. I try to take a pretty, like, it's really complicated and you can have some really positive thoughts there, but we can also get way too in the weeds about some shit that just doesn't matter. What you said, I don't think it doesn't matter. I mean, personally, am I going to stress if I don't have, like, how I like to think about players is how likely is this player going to bury me week 17? So like Isaiah Likely, I think Isaiah Likely could be a nice piece. I like him more on 20-round formats. Do I see him catching 3 touchdowns and 150 yards week 17? Not very likely, but it could happen. Like it could happen to anyone.
Sure.
But, and as far as what you, like, to sum up what you said, it doesn't really matter if you reach on any individual player, if you can, because you're going to always have the uniqueness benefit. Like if you're the only one taking Isaiah Pacheco in the 5th round, and therefore you're the only one who has Isaiah Pacheco plus whatever standard ADP, players behind, like that could be a plus EV move if you really have conviction on that player.
Sure.
Like how much conviction we should have on these players. Like, I don't know, every year we think we know things from preseason and then players are like cut or Trey Sermon is benched and Elijah Mitchell, and there's no news. There was nothing. And it's like, oh, Mitchell's running. Like, how is this possible? But, so I don't know. I try not to like let every bit of news in preseason bleed over me too much. I think it's one way to be a little bit unique from people who might be sharp, people who might be plugged in. And I think people who are sharp and plugged in make a ton of mistakes they don't even realize because they're not even trying to win the contest. They're doing something they just think is like, I try to take a top-down approach like that. Like, how do we win this contest? And that's really hard and complicated, and it's arguable if you can even do much to do that. But I don't know if I answered your question exactly.
Yeah, I think you answered it well enough that you don't need to worry too much about that kind of thing. And I agree with that. And to be clear, Isaiah Likely and Isaiah Pacheco are just the first 2 names that I thought of as guys that are like 18. Like Damian Pierce is a good example of somebody that you used to be able to get him in, like, I don't know, the 15th round, and now he's going in the top 100 picks. There are a million examples of players that are just their ADP changes a lot over time. And and I'm a little bit just concerned about, like, my early draft correlations, like those players that I liked at that point are going to be different than the players that I like now. But I think that you're right that ultimately, that shouldn't be that should clearly not be like the number one factor in how you build, but just something that I'm thinking about a little bit.
Well, maybe I misunderstood your question. So, like, are you saying, like, if a player rises a lot, should we stop drafting him? Is that what you're trying to say? Because
so what I'm trying to say is, so if you like Damian Pierce as a 12th rounder, as an example, and you also like Romeo. Oh man, I'm trying to think of somebody who kind of crisscrossed him who dropped. Yeah. So if you say you like them both as 12th rounders, but they crossed. Williams. Yeah, Jameson Williams. So you were maybe getting a lot of Damian Pierce when he was going in the 13th, 14th round. Now that he's going earlier, and then somebody crisscrossed him, somebody who was going too early and you were never taking them has dropped, and now you're getting a lot of that player. You're going to have the right number of the number that you want of Damian Pierce lineups and the number that you want of Jameson Williams lineups, but they're never going to be together because they kind of crisscrossed, and they were never both going where you think they should be going. At one point, Damian Pierce was going lower than you thought he should go, and you were getting a lot. And at that same point, Jameson Williams is doing the opposite. He was going higher than you thought he should go. Now he's going lower. So now you're getting a lot of Jameson Williams, but you're no longer getting Damian Pierce. So you won't have any lineups that have both of them in it.
Yeah.
And I think that you
Well,
were kind of saying that you don't think that, you should really get too far into the weeds there, which I think
like
is
two
probably true.
individual play, like unless those two players you so strongly like, if someone out there is like, no, Dubs is going to have 1,200 yards and 18, like it doesn't matter what round you take a guy that's going to have 1,200 yards and 18 touchdowns, like that's a good pick, right?
Right.
But yeah, like it really depends on your conviction on those individual players. As far as like what should we do when players really do jump, because I think Damian Pierce is interesting. And I would use Darrell Henderson as an example last year, where post Cam Akers injury, Darrell Henderson went from like a 10th, 12th round pick to a 4th round pick. I was not drafting Henderson with the idea that like, I just don't think that if Henderson is a piece you need in playoffs / finals, you can compete with the super teams there.
Sure.
That was my thought back then. Now thinking about it now, it's really just about like, what do you think the probability a 12th round pick can produce a spike week at the same probability a 4th round pick for those playoffs? And like, like there's going to be years where a bunch of 4th rounders get injured. We kind of saw a little bit of that last year. So, or you could find someone who produces plenty of points. So it's not like always do this, always do that. But yeah, to answer that exact question of like, I personally don't stress. Like, I know there's so many hubs and whatnot, and that's a whole nother discussion. Like, I don't stress, like, do I have enough of X and Y together on the same team? I have convictions on players I want to have big stands on, and I just try to jam them in as many lineups and then flower them around with a bunch of different players as ADP happens.
Okay. Yeah, that works for me. And to be clear, I also don't just mean like two individual players. I guess I mean like clumps of players. Like I worry that, as I'm drafting all summer, I'm going to have a lot of these like 5 players together and these 5, I don't know. So it's because things change so much throughout the summer. But I think that you have adequately answered that question. It was just a question that came to me as we're on air. So not even a really well thought out question, just something that
we got in the weeds on it, though. We got in the weeds on it.
We got into the weeds a little bit. Yeah. Let's take a step back though. Okay. I usually start these streams by asking people a little bit about their background, and you're actually, as I was telling you before we got on air, you're the first person that I've had on that I think of as being primarily a best ball person. Now, Eric Beimfor, I did have him on, and you could argue that he's primarily a best ball player at this point, but he was previously primarily a DFS player. So I'm not going to ask you some of the DFS questions that I think I would normally get into, because I want to focus more of our time on best ball.
Yeah.
But so let's just start. I will ask this one though. What kind of background do you have in statistics? Do you have formal or informal training in statistics or probability?
Yeah. So I went to college for economics, and that in college is also when I started playing DFS. Like maybe my senior year, I would just do a couple lineups. I would play poker sometimes too. Being in Florida, you could play below the age of 21. My senior year, you have a thesis paper you have to write, and I wrote a regression analysis paper. It was like 100 pages long, on predicting the success of wide receivers in the NFL. At the time, I thought I wanted to go work for an NFL team in their analytics department. And also, I approached a couple of people in the mathematics department at my school and the econ club who I thought were smart, really with the idea of also doing, basically building trying to build some of the tools we see today for DFS, being like, hey guys, I was reading a little bit about it. And I think my strength in data is I think I'm really good at intuitively thinking about what kind of independent variables to include. I know my weakness wise, I don't have coding skills to scrape data online. So building data sets is not something I can do, but I think I'm good at, I was good at running regressions and interpreting and writing about and communicating and doing that. And so I did that. I need to find that paper, because the R squared I had of predicting, I used my dependent variable as far as what measures success as a composite of yards accrued in the first 3 seasons and touchdowns converted to yards based on some paper I found. But the R squared was 0.7 or something, just off of like college stats and combine data. And so I think that was my interest. Obviously, applying to be in an analytics department in 2015 was a daunting task. And also, like, I didn't know if I wanted to go live in some bum city, if I could even find a team that would hire some college graduate with like, I didn't go to, I don't have a PhD or anything in stats. If I were to go back to school, I think I would go back for something in data science, just because that interests me. It's tough because, like, I feel like I've had jobs with people skills. Like, I used to be a teacher, a chess teacher in New York City, and I really like talking to people, but I also like analyzing data that's fun to me. So I don't know. I worked for a forensic economics firm for a bit. I worked for a tech startup. I was a teacher, worked for chess.com, and am here today. And I played I've only played NFL, and I've been playing, I don't know, since 2015 or something.
Okay. So clearly you have a very strong analytics background, and also analytics related to sports background. It sounds like you goes pretty deep. And so that obviously probably informs your intuition to some extent. Did you use your analytics background at all otherwise in terms of best ball last year? So when you were building your lineups, or this year building your lineups, you're not using that at all? You shook your head?
No, like, I'm not like building models to like.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. You're not doing anything.
Yeah. Like, for me, how do I draft best ball teams? I think a lot about the game of best ball. And I think one of the things I'm uniquely good at is I'm really good at games, especially when they're brand new and there's not room for someone to work harder than me with information that's correct. And that's why I like best ball, especially because there's some really sharp, smart people here who will put their nose to the grindstone, but I don't even know if there's the correct data or whatnot to tell. Like, I've had Dan Zach, the WSOP player of the year, on my channel to talk about this. And he shared with me some stuff that he did, because he did code up some best ball stuff. And like, I just flat out don't think it's correct to try to optimize to win. I think he did some stuff that makes sense, but like, I just didn't agree with some of what it was or what he was trying to solve for. He wasn't trying to solve for winning the contest. He was trying to solve for how do you advance. And, I know that's a whole nother argument in itself, but I'm firmly on the side that advancing is not how you win the contest, especially in the really large field GPP. So, and also, like, I read historical analysis that I find, like, when I first got into best ball 2 years ago, you could find almost nothing because there just wasn't big enough contests. But I think a lot of historical analysis misses the point where I just don't think people realize how different the draft landscape is year over year. So you can't just apply things that worked in the past, or you can misapply that very easily. Like, I think it's good to know it. It's good to know, how did August teams do last year? It's good to know how running back builds did last year, but it legitimately does not matter if the landscape is wildly different today.
Yep. And do you believe that the landscape has gotten dramatically better over the past couple of years? I mean, you say, as you say, it's a very new game. Best ball is clearly not solved at this point. But do you think the field is getting better?
Yeah, I think the field is definitely sharper. Just think about who the first round pick players were 2 years ago. And, I did Pat Corain wrote a great article, and we kind of I made a video kind of talking about the draft landscape of today, looking at the draft board I won with, and looking at one I did like the other night. And, like the running back dead zone, quote unquote, that has shifted. How many wide receivers go in the first couple rounds, that has shifted. Where rookies go, where veterans go, that shifted. Where quarterbacks go, and obviously it's unique to each site. Like, I'm talking primarily through Underdog here, but like, different sites will, like, DraftKings really takes quarterbacks high. So like, in some senses, yes. And it's interesting because, like, I'm in these high stakes streets, and like, I would argue the high stakes best balls could be the softest out there. And maybe that's because those people are so wealthy, it's like a tax write-off to them, or they have such a big ego, they think that they can auto draft. Like, when I sign in the morning and like a $555 best ball and 3 of the people are on auto draft, I'm like, how do I not max this? Like, I don't
Yeah.
exactly want to invest $30,000 in one tournament, but like, do I think to me, they're paying the rake as far as winning. Now it's a smaller field, so an auto drafter is more likely to win it, but I definitely think people have gotten sharper because there's more content about it. There's, so, what's what will be the next steps? It will be eventually there will be just like AlphaGo, Attack Chess, Attacked Poker. Eventually there will be something like that for best ball, I think.
Okay. So touching on, you mentioned that you think that where different types of players positions are being drafted has changed over the years. Do you think that is it wide receivers being drafted earlier? Is that, where the sharper money is going? Or do you have a typical type of build that you do in terms of like, are you a 0 RB builder where you don't take any running backs in the first few rounds? Or are you a RB anchor builder where you just take one RB early on? Or do you not have a standard type of build that you do?
I do them all. I do all the builds because, they're all logical to me. I think it's, if someone wanted to say, hey, look, you're playing, the nature of a tournament is you're playing a high variance contest anyway. So if someone wanted to say, I'm going to do all my teams hero running back, or all my teams do, like, great, that's fine. You're just taking a higher variance approach to what you're doing. I do all the different builds. I do some builds that are just, I think, are unique and still could win. I do. It's sharper in many different ways. Like this year, like take a player like, I don't know, Gabriel Davis. In years past, I just refuse to believe that like people, and they still need to, like people need to see it to believe it for people are less, they don't need to see it as much anymore. They understand that players can make jumps and that occur, and they're not afraid of being like, this guy's going to fall off a cliff. Like Zeke is probably a first round pick still 2 years ago, if this was just that draft landscape.
Right.
So I think it's gotten sharper in some ways. I still think there's plenty of edge. There's plenty of people who don't give any thought and are just doing whatever. And I don't know, it's even hard to like estimate what a sharp drafter's edge is.
Right.
Ultimately, like I'm just trying to draft one winner across my portfolio,
Yeah, right. So you mentioned Gabe Davis. You gave the example of Gabe Davis. You had like 50 or 60% Gabe Davis, did you not?
Yeah.
And that was taking a leap because he was buried on the depth chart. He was like the number 4 or 5 Bills receiver coming into last year. At least I thought so as a non-Bills fan. So maybe I just didn't know what you knew as far, but I thought, Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders, obviously Stephon Diggs, I thought they were all ahead of Gabe Davis. So in my mind, I was not drafting a ton of Gabe Davis. But here's a question that I want to get around to. It's not about Gabe Davis. I know you'd love to talk about Gabe Davis, who was not on your winning lineup, in your winning lineup somehow.
No.
But the question that I want to get around to is how do you feel about taking a stand on players in general? Are you okay with if a player is that you really love is going in the 18th round or undrafted every time? Are you okay with having 100% of a player?
Yeah. So I think the way we're talking about this, we're talking about large field GPP. So
yes,
large field GPP, because that's what almost everyone listening is playing. That would be listening to this is yes. It starts with, you need to look at what the prize pool is. And when a contest, let's talk about BBM3 right now. First prize is $2 million. 10th place out of 455,000 people is $20,000, right? $20,000 is a lot of money, but it is not $2 million, right? For example, if I had gotten second in BBM2, I would not have quit my job. I would have gotten $250K instead of $1,001. Right. So like after taxes, that's a really great. I would have gone on vacation, would have had a nice little retirement fund, but would have kept on working every day. Right. And so, yes, I'm not afraid because I treat it as an individual DFS slate. Right. Like I understand the time horizon is a long time, but the truth is you are going to lose almost every year. Right. So if you have conviction on a player, it does not bother me if a player gets hurt. Like that leaves a bad taste in some players' mouths where if you have a lot of a player and they get hurt, look, that sucks. I'm sorry. You lose. Just like every other year, you lose.
Yep.
But, you know, I took some high stands on a lot of players, and I'll do that at different positions because I think some positions are more talent based.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, like I had lots of big hits on my stands. I had lots of big misses on my fades too. It's like I had some good fades. I had some bad fades last year. You know, it worked out, but like I had a ton of Jamar. I had a ton of Jamar Chase. I had a ton of Mike Williams. I had a ton of Michael Pittman. I had a ton, like I also had no LaVisca. I had no Jerry Jeudy. You know, like some of these were good process, good results. Some of these were bad process. Like I would argue Jerry Jeudy, I think I got lucky because I think that I think he would have crushed without that high ankle sprain. Derrick Henry too. So, and the leaning into the variance can help you a lot because, you know, i.e. I had big bags of MVS and Gabe Davis. Those guys really helped me advance. I advanced below mathematical expectation for to the playoffs, but I advanced like 6 teams to the semifinals, which was like, you know, advance rates was 1 out of 9, 2 out of 18, because I had big stands on players who did well those weeks. Right now, that was high variance. You could argue that's luck. Like, why did I have big stands on those players? I thought they were good. I thought they'd score touchdowns. That's what matters for underdog fantasy. And I thought, you know, like Gabe Davis, Cole Beasley is 34 and short. Emmanuel Sanders was old and not that tall himself. Like, so there's reasons I'm taking some of these stands, and some of this stuff I don't think I had this all figured out while I was doing it last year. Some of the stuff I've reflected on, like in many ways, I think I'm a better player this year, and that's just gonna happen when you're playing such a new game, and you're gonna reflect positively sometimes. Like in some ways, I think I'm worse this year, like that, you know, in other ways, where I've noticed I still have some big stands in my portfolio, but everything is a little bit more smoothed out at some of the positions. And maybe it's just the sheer volume of drafts I've done on, because I'm maxing drafters. I'm maxing DK. I'm maxing Best Ball Mania 3. So yeah.
How many lineups think you're going to have this year, all told?
We'll have 150. 150. So that's 450 just in the Millie Maker type fields for drafters, DK, and underdog.
Yep.
I have some on FFPC. I don't know, maybe 500 to 600.
Okay, so your volume isn't really that insane. That's probably I'll probably be not too far off there.
Maybe yeah, like, and I'm not doing these Pomeranians. Like I'm trying to put myself in position to get big lucky. Like I'm not trying to win $5,000.
I'm not doing those either.
Like I'll play like the puppy one, like the 200K puppy. I'll play that. So I got 5th in puppy 1 2 last year off of like 10 entrants. That was a nice little bonus too.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Yeah, I mean, it's great if people love playing those with 5,000 first. That doesn't do it for me. If I'm going to be putting money in, it's going to be there for an entire season. I want to have a chance to win, you know, a lot more than that. But I get it why people want to do those. All right, so back to just talking about you mentioned that there are 450,000 people in Best Ball Mania 2. This year, the winner of the regular season also wins a milli. So it doesn't even factor in the playoffs. Does that factor in for you at all when you're building your lineups?
So, I mean, obviously we should talk the drafters. That's the format, right? It's just who scores the most points. So I did a little research just because it's newer to me. And personally, how I used to think about it and how I still think about it a little bit is that I think the playoff format, best balls, is a more strategic game. There's just a lot more strategy when you have to think about what is good, like in my opinion, versus like, how do you win drafters? How do you win? This is you draft the league winners, and you have the most league winners on your team, right? Which I don't think there's as much strategy. Like there's strategy in evaluating the players, and there's a little strategy of like maybe you want running backs earlier, because maybe you want some olds and rookies, whatever. There's still strategy there, but it's not as in depth to me personally. I don't really draft any Best Ball Mania 3 teams with the idea of this one I'm trying to be first out of 455,000 people. Like I would have liked to see them do that a lot differently. At least do top 100 or something. I don't know.
I agree.
Like an all or nothing type thing. Now, I think you can do it sharply. Like I think you can do that and still build a good playoff team. So
Sure.
I think I'm doing that just by nature a little bit.
Right. Yeah, if you're correlating your lineups for like within the same team, and I guess not factoring in the week 17 or that kind of stuff, you can still build in some natural correlation. That correlation within a team, that's correlation for the entire year too. It's not just for week 17, so that's going to help you potentially win the regular season too.
Yeah, and you could like maybe you don't draft DeAndre Hopkins, maybe you add some more olds if you're trying to do that. Maybe you start running back, and you build hyper fragile. It's a little bit rooted in my mind too, just because I'm up on drafters as well.
Yeah, I'm laughing because that was the exact example I was going to give, is that I think sometimes I have chosen not to take DeAndre Hopkins because I've thought this team maybe has a chance at winning first place in the regular season. And I think in retrospect, I'm like, does that really make sense? Out of 450,000 people, one person wins. Should I really be factoring it in at all? Which is why I asked that question, because there are a few of those players like DeAndre Hopkins where I'm like, yeah, he's not playing for the first 6 weeks or whatever, but I probably shouldn't be. I should probably just be trying to win the playoffs and not just trying to win the regular season at all, because that is such a long shot lottery ticket either way.
And I mean, who's to say that Hopkins or Chris Godwin could not be on the regular season champion like that?
Right.
That could, like, if they just start stringing together 25-point games when they're back, they're gonna be on too.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, like I usually draft with the playoffs in mind, and it's a happy accident if I have like that happen. Like the little bit I can share about what I know. The team who did score the most points in the regular season last year for underdog is they did not really draft off of ADP. Like, I mean, this team obviously had James Conner, it had Leonard Fournette, it had Mark. So not only was it like sharp player evaluations, but they also reached to get those guys. And I think the reaching to get the guys makes a lot of sense, where you're just making a very unique team, which makes a lot of sense if you're trying to score the most points in the regular season. You just have a unique build, which also could be good for the playoff rounds.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to another thought, so I mentioned earlier, players ADP is rising and falling, and kind of, have a place where you like them, and so you don't end up on them together. I sometimes think about that in terms of just ADP in general. Like a lot of people are going to have the same, pick one is going to be Jonathan Taylor, whoever it is in the first, or your first 3 picks are going to be highly correlated within lineups to players whose ADPs are around 24, 25. Like there's going to be just like where the ADPs are. So I think it probably makes a lot of sense to just reach sometimes, or just like really pay attention to unique combinations of players, because I think that is a trap that it's really easy to fall into, the ADP trap of like, okay, well now I at the turn of season of round 2 and 3, now I'm looking at players who are ADP from 22 to 30 essentially, and if you just kind of expand that and try to find unique sets of players, that's one way to set yours.
That's something I did a lot last year. So, and last year was easier to do for me because it's a complicated discussion, right?
Yep.
Personally, I did not draft Ezekiel Elliott. I did not draft Derrick Henry, and I did not draft Alvin Kamara. Instead, I was taking like Stephon Diggs a lot there, and I was taking sometimes like Austin Eckler, but usually Diggs. And so Diggs was like the guy who like I just had very unique player comp, because it's unquestionably positive EV to me to do that. Yep. But if you're asking me this year, I don't really want to fade any. Like I feel like this is a unique year. I don't want to fade any of the top 6 guys. I don't want to fade Eckler plus Chase. Like all those guys.
Jefferson,
I think.
Cup.
Yep. Yeah. I think all those guys are like really great picks, unique. Where in 2 years past, like we've not had an as efficient as a top of draft, in my personal opinion. Where I would do it more is at the back end of the draft. And why it's also complicated to do is if you're drafting throughout the course of the offseason, you could think you're getting these unique stands of players at the top of draft, and then that player just naturally over the like you could be like, oh, I'm taking Mark Andrews at the 1-2 turn. to start the season when he was, and then he actually got up to the 1-2 turn
Right.
and he fell back down. Right. So,
Yep.
and one of the most plus EV ways to draft is when you get unique player combos below ADP that no one else has got, no one else in the contest has had. So
Right.
like, and so in every draft, once in a blue moon, you'll find a draft where whatever AJ Brown falls to the 4th round because you're in a draft room that doesn't like the, you know, like whatever.
Yeah.
It
Right.
can happen. And then so you can get that unique. And if you are reaching early and you forgo that ever happened,
That opportunity.
Like,
yep.
yes. And like I remember, like I had some very unique, like I still remember, like, oh man, I have the only one of the, like I have to have one of the only like Dalvin Cook, Antonio Gibson, Najee Harris starts last year, back when like 2 of those guys were 2-3 turns. Or I had like a Devontae Adams CMC team. I'm like, wow, this is so rare and unique. Now, so like, and it's so like I think it's something you should do more as the season gets closer to starting, because you kind of have all the info. But ultimately, you know, like it's also going to be totally unique, the back end of your roster. So it's only if the first, second, third round players score the most points in week 17 when it really matters, you know?
Yep. Let me take a minute away from this conversation with Liam Murphy to tell you about our sponsor, OddsShopper. Make your best bets in 30 seconds or less with OddsShopper. With hundreds of bets featured daily, OddsShopper gives you the edge you need betting player props and game lines across all sports. Sign up for free now via the link in the video description below to gain access to our proprietary data, which will help you make your best bets. With expected win percentages and ROIs included, OddsShopper uses the same DFS projections we use here at Stokastic to filter out the best bets available. OddsShopper also features a parlay builder with optimized parlays and an arbitrage tool that identifies risk-free, guaranteed profit bets that you can make across sportsbooks. All right, so I brought up this listener question, pulled it up because we were kind of getting into it already, talking about the drafters format and considering the regular season winner on Underdog. So Theoretical had a listener question. Ask him if he thinks the future optimal format of best ball is the current one, where you essentially tie up money for 5+ months for what amounts to a week 17 GPP, or if total points leagues are a better indicator of drafting ability and more fun in general. You sort of already answered this question, but if you want to add anything to it.
Look, I mean, I like drafters now too. I think it's just a different part of the brain, but I think there's a lot more strategy in playoff formats. That's just personally what I think. Yep. Like, I don't think how much strategy is it to just jam all the league winners on one team. The strategy is draft the best players, right? Which you could people like to throw up their hands. This is a complicated game. So they don't like to think about minute edges that could be useful. They like to throw up their hands, draft the best players, right? Yep. Which is like, fine. Okay, do that. I think about lots of nuanced micro edges that I'm trying to grind. Like, I had a big bag on Chris Carson and Rashad Penny last year because they played the Lions week 17, right? Yep. And I thought the Lions would have a bad run defense, and that happened to be right, right? But like, whatever. It's a high variance thing. It's very chaotic anyways. I don't think the future is strictly season long. I think it will be, I don't know. It's like, what can Underdog do? They can't release like a $200 million contest next year. Like there's going to be formats where it goes throughout the Super Bowl. So there's going to be formats where it includes the playoff weeks. I don't really know what the future of best ball is. Hopefully the future is that it gets picked up on, like, they start talking about it on Monday Night Football. Like, hey, don't worry about that managed. Like, it gets in with a more casual crowd, and I don't know, just more contests. Tying up your money is not the most ideal thing, but it's better than investing your money if the market goes down. Like if the market goes up, you feel like an idiot. But I don't know. It's a complicated thing, anyways.
And Underdog also does a great thing, I think, by releasing the money that you've already won each round. So after you have moved on to round 2, they'll release to you whatever guaranteed money you have from getting to the playoffs, which is kind of cool. So they try to mitigate it at least a little bit. You're still tied
good
up
luck with DK. DK's getting
DraftKings will not be doing that probably anytime soon. I think that the formats question. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that ideally we just have more of both, because I think that it's different types of players. I mean, you are a chess player. You're clearly you like the puzzle of best ball, and the puzzle I think is more interesting when you have those playoff weeks factored in. And then there's also people who are just like super into football and like getting into the weeds with football and like having the best player picks. And for them, maybe just having the drafters kind of format where it's just
And I'm
regular
both
season.
like that. Like
Yeah.
I do that too. And I understand, like, there are, I noticed there's a lot of big fantasy football accounts who historically can just do hashtag player takes, and they're not thrilled. Some of them are not thrilled that game theory and the game, because people are gambling on best ball, right? And that's what they want to hear about. They want to hear about your player takes to win money in best ball, is really what's kind of happening in the summer. They're not caring about your player takes to win their home league anymore, right? Yep. So you need to adapt as a big content creator. And I understand why some people just want to be like, they just want to talk about football players, which I love football, right? Like I watch all the games. So like that's part of, like, am I grinding film in the off season? No, but I remember how players look playing. I look at that type of stuff.
Yeah, right. Exactly. There's different things you need to be looking at, and to be the best you can be, you kind of have to be somebody who kind of likes puzzles, who likes game theory a little bit, and then also who kind of likes the data and
and to be clear, like I'm probably, maybe I'm not even a good best ball player. Who knows, right? I think I am. I approach it thoughtfully, but I think other things that people should realize is you should not use a 1-year sample to measure if you're good at best ball, right? If your results were you lose all your money 1 year, you lose all your money a second year, you lose all your money a third year, you win the contest the fourth year, you won a lot of money. If instead of you min cash, right? Yeah. And people just draft too safe. They don't want to lose, rather than like they don't take a high risk portfolio for the high risk game they're playing. And I think people are doing that more now. Like I think like my voice has helped a little bit with that, and other people have thought about it more. But I think people are more like just like random people be like, oh yeah, I have a ton of this guy now. You know?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. As somebody who has had no success at best ball, I've yet to get to a championship round in best ball, and I'm like, man, am I just bad at this? And then I have to take a step back and be like, I've really only played 2 150 lineup slates so far. So to not have a lot of success in those 2-1, it's not a huge thing. But the same thing also applies to DFS. I mean, bad DFS players win the Millie Maker all the time, and there's a lot more Millie Makers in DFS, so it's not quite the same. So far, I think that honestly, everybody that I've seen who has won in best ball has been a sharp, which I think kind of makes us think like.
Like how disastrous would it have been if like I auto drafted the winner? Like that would not have been good, right? Yeah. Like, and I mean, for a really large field GPP, like you either need to get really lucky with your auto drafted team. I just don't think it's that feasible.
It's tough to win that way.
Yeah.
Underdog makes it a little bit easier because unlike DraftKings, again, on Underdog, you can at least set like the parameters of how many at each position you'd want. So like it's a little bit easier in that way, which I wonder if that's why some people in the high stakes contests are letting it auto draft, because they're thinking it's a small enough contest, the correlation doesn't matter as much. I just want to get the best players that I can, so they're letting it go to auto draft. But I agree with you. It's still it's a lot tougher to win if you're auto drafting than it is if you are correlating, and even correlating not even if it's not like quarterback to wide receiver, just correlating like, okay, I've got these 2 anchor running backs. Now I'm gonna wait and draft more risky running backs at the end. Like there's so much things that you need to be correlating like within your position groups and like quarterback to wide receiver and stuff. So to me,
it's like the position limits obviously help. And I have an idea of what I would do if I was auto drafting to ensure I kind of got the teams how I wanted them to look with position limits, where like I feel like I would move up some of the quarterbacks and do like max 2. So I would just be like, okay, I'm going to always have, I'm going to basically fade 3rd round players at the expense of, and have 4th round players and get my quarterbacks there. And like, I could, I could like move up Josh Allen and whatever. Like, I think there's things I could do to auto draft it correctly for playoff tournaments, but like the drafting is part of the fun too.
Yeah. along those lines, so here's just something that just came to my mind as you're talking about this, concerns about like, well, what if you get, Joe Burrow and Trey Lance? I don't know if those are, but they both have week 9 bye weeks. I think they might not, but
Week
sometimes I
10,
wonder.
maybe.
I want to hear what your thoughts are on this. Sometimes I wonder if I get too cute with my like, okay, I'm going to draft 4 running backs and they're all going to have different bye weeks. So like I like go out of my way to make sure that my running backs all have different bye weeks. And now as I'm doing it more and more, I'm like, maybe I'm making a mistake because I never have, Antonio Gibson and AJ Dillon, I think, have the same bye week. For example, like I'll like rarely have 2 running backs with the same bye week. So I'm doing it less and less. But how much? So part of me is concerned that I'm trying to make my teams too pretty as opposed to making the teams that are actually going to put up the best numbers.
So, like I would have 0 issues having 2 quarterbacks with the same bye even. And knowing I'm eating a 0 for a couple of reasons. I think if you look at the data, sometimes it is like actually 20 points is the difference between advancing or not. But I'm just telling you, like, this is a little anecdotal because it's looking through my teams. A lot of the ways you advance is, do you have a league winner? Yes or no? And, i.e. if you had Cooper Kupp and Mark Andrews on a team last year, you could advance whatever you want. And so whatever you're sacrificing and a little bit of advancement, you're making up for uniqueness. Like, especially if like someone like you, who I think is smart, will not do a strategy because you don't think it's good. I think I can, then I'm only drafting against people who are not good at the game. And I think I can sharply build those types of teams. And ultimately, you're not trying to build the highest scoring team. You're trying to build the team that can win probably with the least amount of points or get the luckiest, where either you're wanting to get grouped with the worst teams. This is out of your control, but that's what you want. And, this was a discussion I was having on Twitter today. Like, in my opinion, I would rather advance 150 teams on Underdog who finish second place rather than first place, because it inherently means I have less league winners, and therefore my portfolio is more unique than the other playoff teams.
Yeah, I really like that idea of doing what the sharp players aren't doing in some instances. It's kind of counterintuitive. Like, you want to do what the sharp players are doing in general. So the best example that I can think of is 2020. I forget the year that I won the Millie. It was like 2 weeks after I won the Millie. Mike Davis, Christian McCaffrey had been injured. Mike Davis was a starting running back for the Panthers at 4,000, and he was projected for like 50% ownership. And I was at this time given the puzzle, like, well, I know that he's going to be highly owned by the sharp players because he projects so well for 4,000 points. And I ultimately decided to fade Mike Davis because I thought, hey, yeah, he's probably going to get 12, 13, 14 points at 4,000, and that's a great number. But I would rather hope that he fails, that he does worse, that doesn't score any touchdown, doesn't put up a big number, and be on the side of the non-sharp players. So if he's going to be 50% owned, and I think it's going to be majority sharp players who are really paying attention to projections, I would rather do what the people who are not using projections are doing and be competing with them. And the rest of my lineup is still going to be, I'm using projections and I'm creating highly projected lineups, but I'm kind of excluding all of those sharp players who are playing Mike Davis. So that's, sometimes I like to think about it that way, that kind of game theory of sometimes you just want to be knowing who you're going to want to be competing against. And I would rather be competing against non-sharp players at times. And that week it worked out. And
it's hard to know when you're in a bubble and like maybe you're not competing. But also here's an example. Like, many of the content voices I was listening to last year, Eric Beimfor, Pete, they all loved LaVisca. So like part of the fade and Jerry, like part of the fade was not just because I thought he was a bad pick. And like, it was also because all of these sharp people are on this guy. So I can draft literally anyone else and I'm going to be different from them that way. So it's like, A, I don't think he's that good. B, I get this angle here. So it's hard to like think through and know what sharp, quote unquote, sharp people are doing, but you can kind of get a vibe for it once you draft enough teams.
Yeah, I'm very much on Twitter, so I see all the takes on Twitter, and I mean I think that those guys are really sharp, and I really respect their opinions. But sometimes even doing different than the people whose opinions you respect. Sometimes I think you can find a little bit of edge just by thinking about it, taking it that extra step of, well, maybe I don't want to be doing it. If all of them are doing this one thing, maybe I don't want to be doing that, and take my chances, especially if you think the risk reward is, makes sense to do that. And the Mike Davis example I gave was I wasn't that confident that he was going to be a league or a slate breaker. So I think that sometimes it makes sense to do that. But moving on, so you've talked a lot about week 17 kind of correlation. You're concerned about winning the tournament. You're not concerned about just advancing. You're very focused on, you're trying to win the tournament because it's the winner makes so much more than 10th place, for example. So a listener question we got from Matthew Wood asked, there has been a lot of focus on week 17 correlation this season for tournaments. So yeah, we're talking the largest field GPPs. How do you negotiate trade-offs in EV between qualifying for the tournament in week 14 and the top heavy payouts for finalists in week 17?
Yeah. And that's not a question I've gotten that in the weeds in. Like, okay, so I should do XYZ if I'm trying to do one versus the other. Like, look, I'm trying to draft players I think are good. That's definitely part of it. I try to build teams that are unique. That's definitely part of it. My first year playing best ball, I really looked at weeks 15, week 16, week 17, and I would assess. And I remember I faded Dalvin Cook my first year because I thought he had a tough run defense schedule. Which was kind of true in the playoff rounds, but Dalvin Cook was a league winner that year for advancement reasons. So I think that was so last year I really just said, how do you win? Strictly week 17. Let's keep it simple here. I don't think the week 17 has gone. I think some people don't understand what week 17 means. Obviously week 17 is very important because that's where all the money is. But I think when some people are too in the weeds with this week 17 game stacks, it's no one's saying reach far above to do it. But I think they also don't understand ways you can stack week 17. You can take two players on a good team facing a bad team, and congratulations, you have stacked week 17. And you're just saying a team like the Bucks are going to beat the shit out of a team like the Panthers, right? You could take Godwin and Mike Evans, and that's your week 17 stack. You don't even need a bring back here, right? So there are some teams I do the bring backs, but I'd ask you, Neil, you're a bigger DFS shark than me. Let's pretend you are playing Millie Make. Let's say you're week 1. There's a DraftKings Millie Maker for 4K and $400 and change, whatever. It's about 600 people. Are you going to force a bring back? Are you going to bring back your whole lineup? What would you do? Knee jerk right now. It's a little bit different because you're talking salary versus draft pick, but you rough proxy there. Would you, how often are you forcing bringbacks? Obviously it depends, right?
It does depend. So typically in the larger field tournaments, I am more likely to force a bring back than if it's only 600 people in the field, I'm less likely to force a bring back. So the answer is, I don't know how often I force a bring back in a 600 person contest. I probably don't do it. I think that I correlate.
But maybe we should be thinking of a draft of a best ball final as maybe it's 10x the number. Maybe just because it's all super teams that made it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's okay, it's 600 people, but it's akin to a 6,000 salary. Yeah. I don't know, but you know what I mean there. So all I say that is because I know Adam, who you work with, he's
Adam Sherry.
He gives big pushback on the week 17 things.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not correlating every single player. Ultimately, it starts with who do I think could score a lot of points week 17, and that's not always a bring back for me, right?
Yeah.
I do it sometimes, and it's I do. There are some games I would more want a bring back for, but there are some games where it's just I think this player can score a lot of points, and I think best ball analysis is pretty terrible out there for winning money. How should it be? It should probably be how often does this player spike? How high are their spikes?
Yep.
And how likely do we think they're going to do it against their week 17 opponent? That's probably something.
So here's a concern that I think any DFS player would bring. So you said this on your stream with Pete Overset as well. Like you had, I think in the stream you did, you had T Higgins and Jamar Chase in your lineup. You said that's correlation right there. Those players are positively correlated. My concern would be so if you have, and in that lineup you have both T Higgins and Jamar Chase, you did not have Joe Burrow. Don't you have concerns there that somebody else is going to have those two and Joe Burrow? And if they both do well, then Joe Burrow clearly did well, given their price tag.
Are you talking about my winning team?
I don't believe I'm talking. Were they both in your winning team? If so, then maybe.
My winning team was I had Chase and Boyd without Burrow.
Okay, Chase and Boyd. Okay.
Well, I mean, to me, we're talking about stacks. The quarterback is the least important part of the stack. Where Joe, whatever. If you have, let's just talk about your example because it's more cost prohibitive. If you have T Higgins and Chase and you don't take Joe Burrow, I think that's totally logical that T Higgins and Chase can ping pong in the playoff weeks and allowing you to advance a lower owned player. So maybe you do not want to count on both for week 17 because it's less likely that you're going to get two pass catchers from the same team to reach ceiling outcomes, right? If we're talking pure ceiling here. But, what happened was I had Josh Allen and Joe Burrow did have, he didn't bury, a quarterback is almost never going to be the piece that buries you in any best ball final. Unless one quarterback scores 50 points and no other quarterback scores more than 25, which you don't see that, right? And so I don't think that's a big deal about I think people also try to force, they'd rather have last year, they'd rather have a stacked Baker Mayfield with a Browns pass catcher than Tyreek Hill and Baker Mayfield, which take the players on the good teams and make it work with the quarterback is more what I would want to do there.
And that makes sense to me. And that's something that I definitely fall into that trap sometimes where I'm like, okay, I'm going to take Trevor Lawrence because I have Christian Kirk already instead of taking Tua because I don't have any Miami pass catchers. And that's, I think that was a decision that I just made. And I think I went with Trevor Lawrence, but I was really questioning myself because I'm like, but Tua has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And I think he's probably
that really depends how you view those two quarterbacks.
Yeah, I guess. But it's but that's the kind of math you need to be doing constantly. How much is a correlation worth versus projection? And sometimes it's better.
Well, it's what you said earlier too. People want to look at their teams and say this looks nice.
Yeah,
you feel good when you have stacks and the quarterbacks, but it's not always I'll build some teams where I just draft a bunch of good players and then my last 4 picks are quarterback. And I'm taking whoever I think can score points there. I don't care if I have a stack for them. If I have a stack, great. But if I have all players on the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Bills, and then my quarterbacks are Carson Wentz, Marcus Mariota, whoever, and I'm just going to get all the points from the skill positions, and my quarterbacks are going to roughly match the the superstars, or I just have more points in my skill positions than those teams because they took a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that you used to pay a lot more attention to week 15 and 16 in terms of building your lineups. Do you still pay attention at all to week 15 or 16 game sets, or have you shifted completely to focusing on week 17 at this point?
It's a happy accident if I'm stacked for those weeks or anything. It's not something I try to do at all. I'm aware of the juiciest schedules for that.
Okay.
Also because I play the FFPC main event, which is a composite of weeks 15 through 17. So obviously that's important to know those I know the Broncos have really good matchup. I know teams have good matchups, but I'm not being oh, I can't. I'm not trying to I know some people I think Alex made an article about stacking week 16 if you accept that you can't control for week 17, which I just don't accept that we can't. I think we can.
Okay.
So that's why I would not do that.
All right. So you're more focused on week 17.
You're facing against, we should mention 15 people, 16 people in weeks 15, 16. You're not facing against 460 people.
Yep. All right. So while we're still, we were just talking about stacking a little bit. So I wanted to bring back, so Eric Byenfor, when he was on the show, he told me that he thinks that one of the bigger mistakes people make is overstacking, taking too many players with the quarterback. What's your take on that? How much do you think you should be stacking within a team?
It depends on a couple of things. What is the team? What is the cost of the players? For example, and what's your take on what they're going to do? So if we talk about the Bills last year, I thought the Bills were going to run a lot of 4 wide receiver sets because that's what they did the year before. That turned out to be wrong. They ran Dawson Knox a lot, and that came at the expense of a 4th wide receiver. So last year, I would take like the Cardinals and the Bills. I would take all 4 pass catchers on a team if I wanted, because they run 4 wide receiver sets, and ultimately all it does is it puts a little bit more stress on your roster to be important week 17. But in my mind, it makes it easier to advance, not only in the playoff rounds, but also in the regular season if you're right on the offense. So like, if you would allow me to have all pass catchers on the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, like I'm not like Xing out some of the Chiefs pass catchers because I took other ones with Patrick Mahomes. Same with the Bills. Would I do it on the Jets? No, I would not. Would I do it on the Bears? No, I would not. Right. Like, so it depends. And if it's really cheap, like I was doing a DK high stakes. Obviously it's easier in 20 rounds too. I took like Carson Wentz with all his cheap pass catchers. But I'm getting stacks in the 17th, 18th, 19th round. So, I have some teams that are super stacked like that, but I'm not trying to do it for every single team. So, but I don't think it's a mistake. It really depends what overstacking means to you, like in what area. Like, I think the way I talked about it, I don't think it's that bad. But if overstacking means like they're trying to reach to get their quarterback and they're trying to reach skill position players on what I perceive to be bad offenses because they took a quarterback, then I do think that's a mistake. So I would agree with Eric in that sense.
Okay. So, there's not like a limit. Like I don't want more than 3 pass catchers from the same team where I have the quarterback. You don't set a limit like that. It really just depends on what does it cost to get those pass catchers kind of for you.
And how good do I think the player is? Because like wide receiver is a very talent position, analysis by me. Like I naturally have bigger stabs and bigger fades at the wide receiver position than running back and tight end, which I view as more like opportunity / tight end is like literally who falls in the end zone for week 17 is how you make money. Right. Whereas like wide receiver is like, I'm more confident in who is good at football and who is going to be catching a lot of yards and touchdowns. So yeah, but like, when it gets expensive, then it is a little tough. Like, like, I don't know, all of the like Chase and Higgins like that. I do that on some teams still because the case is there, but I do like for pure ceiling week 17, it's not ideal to have 2 expensive guys from the same offense.
Right. Okay. Makes sense to me. All right. So we've got about 10 minutes left, give or take. I feel like we could talk about this kind of stuff forever, but I'm gonna try and get on some quick hitting questions.
Let's hit them.
Yeah. Do you believe there is an optimal time to draft in best ball, like time of the year?
I draft throughout the off season. Last year I barbelled a lot early, a lot late.
Yep.
This year I did even more early. And was happy. I'm happy with that decision. I understand. Like, look, there's bull cases for both of them. And here's the bull case for drafting late is you're drafting with casuals, right? And you have more news. The bull case for drafting early is you get unique player combinations that you can't ever get again, which makes sense to me too. So I do both. No, I don't think there's an optimal time. And every bit of news offers a new, unique ADP landscape where it's okay to take a player who's risen in cost if you mix in a player who's fallen in cost. But you can be like, way too many people are posting teams they think are unique that I can build today because they don't realize that like half the players on their team have fallen. Like it's when you have a team where everyone has risen, right, that is a unique team. Okay.
Yep. I'm the same way. I've been building throughout the summer. I'll probably end up doing more late just because I didn't get through enough best ball drafts. So some more of them will be late, but yeah, I definitely build throughout.
Not to mention quality of life. Like you don't want to have to do 1,000 best balls in a week. Like,
yeah, exactly. Just difficult to make good lineups and not enjoyable at all. It does get fatiguing to be building best ball drafts all the time. On that note, slow drafts or fast drafts?
Fast.
Okay. 100% exclusively fast drafts?
I do slows in the high stakes when literally like all these people with their tail tucked between their leg, they won't fill the fast.
Okay.
So literally only the slows would fill in some of these. And I will do some slows as the season comes up if I just can't get the volume in because the clock starts to speed up. But for me, mental health wise, it's much better for me to do a fast for many reasons. I'm a rip it and be done. Like I don't want to be, and people are so sweaty, man. Like the people who draft at like midnight to try to catch you on a clock, or they want to catch injury news. Like it's like, Jesus Christ, just rip your pick. I understand if you have a family and whatnot, and slow is all you can do. That's a different thing than I'm in. But for me, I don't want to be worrying about missing picks. I don't want to be auto drafting picks. And I'm like ADHD. Like I can hyper focus, plug in, map it all out in a fast draft. When it's slow draft, I have to go through like, what was I trying to do?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I actually do about 50-50 of both. I found that, the benefit to doing slow drafts, you can do a million at once. But yeah, I kind of, it's less enjoyable because you get back into it and you're like, wait,
you're always on the clock.
Yeah. And I try to queue players up that I want, like, so that I can, if those players are still available, I can remember, oh yeah, this is what I was trying to do in this draft, but it doesn't always work out that way. So yeah, for me, there are pros and cons to both. I think that fast drafts are also like, if you are a quick thinker, there's a little bit more edge in fast drafts because there are people who are going to be, oh, he took my quarterback, and they just, kind of fall apart and draft bad teams. So I think that, they're,
and I'd like to see even faster clocks personally.
Faster than 30 seconds. Wow.
I would like to see, like, I think 15 seconds is like realistically the shortest they could do an underdog, but I would like to see that. And I think like I have a background, I play chess, I play blitz chess, bullet chess. So, I can play a chess game in a minute. Of course I can draft a team.
True. Easy
I can make one pick in 30 seconds. Easy.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What's the most tilted you've ever been during a best ball draft? If at all.
That's a really great question. And I honestly try not to be tilted. And I think it's one of my strengths as a gambler is like, I really do try not to be tilted, where if someone reaches to like explicitly try to ruin my team, and like, I can tell they're trying to do that, I'm like, whatever, I can make it up on the, like, you cutting off your face does not help you. It does not help me. If it happens in a high stake draft, it does make me suspicious that like someone's trying to collude or something. When like, if a guy next to me is taking all my quarterbacks and another dude, I don't know, but not to get out the tinfoil hat. I don't have like a memory of like, I don't have a specific tilting memory.
Okay. I never know if people are actually trying to screw up your stacks and stuff, but there are certainly times for me where it's like, you just took that quarterback who you have no correlation with 25 picks ahead of ADP when I have both the receivers. And it's like, this feels like you're trying to screw up my draft, but I try not to be too tinfoil hatty either, because maybe they just really like that quarterback.
In general, like, it's a waste of energy to be tilting, right?
It
like,
is.
It's just not a sharp thing to do. It takes you out of the right. So like, I think playing poker, you just have to manage tilt. It's a really long day. Not that I'm the best at, like, in poker, it's boredom for me. Like I usually am pretty good, and that's like, God, I'm bored. Then that's why I like best ball too, because it's rip and be done.
I agree. Yeah, it's not worth tilting. It's hard not to sometimes when people really snipe you and it doesn't make sense for their
team.
I
literally just can't. I can tell you the other day in a high stakes draft, I had Chase and Higgins, and Dan Zach took Joe Burrow when I thought another quarterback correlated with him, and I thought that was confusing to me. And I didn't like, he didn't try to get anyone in the back stack, but I was like, okay, maybe he just really likes Joe Burrow. Like, good for you. And again, like, the quarterback is the least important part of the stack. So I get annoyed when there's a player I want right ahead of me, and then that gets taken. But it's like, whatever, you got to move on. You make your pick,
I actually talked to Dan Zach, and he told me that he did that because you rubbed him the wrong way. He kind of hated you after your interview. No, I'm kidding. I don't know Dan Zach, but I'm sure it was, he just liked Joe Burrow.
Dan, I mean, and I know like Dan is probably playing high stakes poker the whole day. So I would guess he auto drafts some of his picks because he's making a much more financial decision than making a best ball pick.
Yeah. Okay. So you do all of the best ball sites. You do Underdog, you do DraftKings, you do Drafters, you do FPPC, which I'm not really familiar with.
Yeah. FFPC. I'm not on like, and those are managed. Most of FFPC, there's best ball there too. And there's some other fringe sites that I'm not on yet. Like I don't do Yahoo. I don't do FanDuel.
Yeah. They don't really have big tournaments. They just have kind of like cash game.
No, and
ball.
I'm not a cash game, strictly tournaments.
Okay, me too. Do you have a favorite of the best ball sites?
I mean, you gotta say Underdog, right? Like
that's what I figured. You got to go with one where you won the million bucks.
I mean, honestly, like I'm such a visual person that the lack of draft board on DraftKings like literally pains me not having that. But like that's an easy way for me to see how many picks do I have left. What does this person do? Like it's just such a pain to do it. I do like DraftKings for the high stakes though, like that's just scratching degenerate energy though, because I like the way they've structured their high stakes better than Underdog, where Underdog sponsor my channel, love Underdog, but they seem to be, they want the contest a bit flatter, they want which makes sense, like you want more people to have a positive experience. And I like that DK, it's like 250K to first, rather than like 20K on a 1K buy-in.
Yep. Okay. All right. So we are running out of time. So I'm just going to close out with the question that I ask everybody at the end of this stream. You might have an obvious answer for this one. Tell me about your favorite DFS or best ball win or win celebration.
I mean, we got to go with Best Ball Mania too. I've had a couple close binks in my life, to be honest with you. A couple sweats
in DFS.
In DFS where it's like, oh, holy shit, I could win the Millie Maker. Like finishing top, 100, whatnot. If I had made the right swap or whatever, like I still remember some of those sweats. And it's funny with best ball because last year was my second year playing, and my boys group from home who I was on the bachelor party with, I text them as the season starts going. I'm like, boys, can I get a week 14 in the chat? And they're like, they don't gamble. They're like, week 14, like, boys, can I get a week 15 in the chat? Week 15, And so then they were with me in the bachelor party in Key West for me winning. I mean, they had to leave for the Monday night game, and you got to wait for the score changes, whatever. But it was essentially locked in. I was winning, barring like Nick Chubb scoring 100 fantasy points.
Yeah.
And so got to go with Best Ball Mania too. We'll never forget that.
Yeah, and to win it at a bachelor party is that's pretty amazing. That's like
legendary. Yeah,
the absolute dream. All right, Liam, where can people find you?
You can see me on Twitter at ChessLiam. I got a YouTube, just Liam Murphy on YouTube. Don't know how much more. Gonna be taking a break again. I'm sick right now, so gonna take a rest. But yeah, just you can see me on Twitter. Thanks for having me on, Neil.
Right on. Well, thank you, Liam, for coming on episode 21, aka season 2, episode 1 of High Stakes. Thanks to Mike Lawrence for producing as always. And thank you for watching. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll catch you next time.